Welcome to the StoryMap Screenwriting Podcast. My name is Dan Calvisi of act4screenplays.com. Today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man Homecoming. And as usual, I'm joined by Steve Lam, site expert at bamsmackpow.com. How's it going, Steve?
It's going awesome, Dan. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about Spider-Man today in his second reboot in the film universe and his first solo outing since joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes, we last saw him in Captain America Civil War, where he was kind of a new recruit, wasn't officially an Avenger, and now we're hinting that he is. Oh, I guess he walked away at the end of this one, so right. Spoiler warning, of course. So anyway, there's a big connection to the Avengers. But so we're going to be talking today about the film. We're going to talk about the movie and the script. So we're going to try and tie most of this into screenwriting lessons for writers. So we'll talk about some of it as if you had written a spec script called Spider-Man Homecoming and it was being read by a reader at a studio. So kind of if you can think about what's on the page, we'll be doing that. And then I'll also be bitching about the movie a little bit, and we'll just kind of talk about our own interests. So what we usually like to start off with is, where do you put Spider-Man Homecoming in your ranking of personal favorite Marvel films?
So for me, I put it as number 4, and that's tied with Iron Man. And so my rankings would go: number 1 is The Avengers, number 2, Captain America Civil War, number 3, Captain America The Winter Soldier. Number 4 is Iron Man, and Spider-Man Homecoming are tied, and the 5th is Guardians of the Galaxy. And I put it at 4th because I really enjoyed the character development of Spider-Man and making sure that, you know, there's a lot of added humor to his character and a lot of, I would say, he's very much a go-getter, a very proactive protagonist. So that's what made me like this movie so much and like the character, the interpretation of Peter Parker in this version so much.
Now that's, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's very different from Iron Man as a movie. It's not an origin story, and he isn't a reluctant hero, whereas Tony Stark was kind of a reluctant hero for the first half of the original Iron Man, if I'm correct.
Correct.
So is it mostly just your favorite? You're just kind of feeling this is what I like, or do you actually see parallels between the film? Maybe like they focus so much on the main character and you like that?
I think the fact, you brought a very good point. I think it is part of it, the fact that DNA wise, Iron Man and Spider-Man Homecoming are alike because they have a very strong character spine. Using the word of one of my UCLA professors in screenwriting, very strong character spine, but they are contrasted. I mean, yes, you're right. Tony Stark was a very reluctant hero, and Spider-Man Homecoming is pretty much a breath of fresh air, which is something we've seen sort of in Wonder Woman recently, is that this dark, I don't want to do it, you know, I've been, you know, cursed with these powers sort of heroes, kind of, I'd say, kind of getting a rest right now. You know, they're taking a vacation from that, and they're going for more of a character that's like, I really want to do this. I like to save people, and this is my job. This is what I love to do. So I kind of enjoy the sort of new angle that they're taking with superheroes. That's sort of not new, but it's sort of going back to the old school roots of heroes that actually love their job and like what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And they often say that in tough times in the world, really happier, cheerful movies do better at the box office, and then vice versa. So maybe since we've had a pretty tumultuous couple years here in the world and in America, we're ready for more purely good characters, you know, good superheroes who are fighting for the forces of good, you know. And he's kind of an innocent too, you know. Peter Parker is definitely an innocent kid, a babe in the wilderness, fish out of water. So that's a nice turn from, you know, the dark, brooding superhero. As far as my rankings of the Marvel films, I don't have a real hard ranking, just roughly. I was making a list, and it doesn't make the top 5, unfortunately. Spider-Man Homecoming does not. It's somewhere, I don't know, it's somewhere after 10 or maybe around 10, 9, 10. So I did enjoy it. I liked it better the second time. So the first time I kind of saw a lot of kind of glaring errors, if you will, and I was really picky, and you called me a crotchety old man.
Yep.
Get off my lawn. This isn't good enough, you know. But I did like it better the second time. So why don't we launch into we each have 5 screenwriting lessons / gripes / pieces of praise.
Right.
So why don't we start with my number 1, which is a criticism and kind of a suggestion. I think because Spider-Man is so acrobatic and he's so much about flipping around and clinging to walls and swinging on webs, I think they should go Nolan with this. I think they should go practical. I think they should hire more acrobats and try to avoid as much CGI. There were some really amazing CGI digital double sequences where we know that Spider-Man is CGI, you know, but he is moving well enough that it's not jarring. Doesn't look like a piece of rubber. But then there were also moments where he did look like a piece of rubber, which is kind of unfortunate, because at this point in you know, CGI technology, that still happens sometimes. You can tell they're a digital double. So what I think is that they should mix in more scenes with actual acrobats and parkour artists, and, you know, find some amazing dancers, you know, people from Cirque du Soleil, you know, who can do these amazing acrobatic feats with their bodies, put them in the spider suit, and really emphasize that in a way that makes it look real, you know, the way that Christopher Nolan might do. Do you think that might work?
I think it might work, but to tell you the truth, I actually, and also to add to that, you know, Tom Holland is actually acrobatic himself, right? If you look at those videos of him when he was 14, he actually, there's Tom Holland doing backflips and somersaults and things like that. So that's one of the reasons why he won this role, is that he had that ability, the acrobatic, very athletic ability. Aside from that, I actually didn't have a problem with this, and I think it's because going in, you know, these movies are fake, and you know these movies are going to be CGI enhanced. So when you see those things, it's not that jarring to you, because like, oh, that's expected. Now, going off your other sentiment about going Nolan with this, I always felt that because Spider-Man's movements are so amazingly acrobatic, right? The way he jumps, the way he leaps, like these, you know, large bounds, that those are the things that only can be done with digital effects. That's just my take on it. And I was wondering if maybe if you did it with actual acrobats, it wouldn't look fantastic enough, right? You know, lack of a better word, if I really want to use puns, it wouldn't be as amazing, as spectacular, as fantastic, right? As you would expect from Spider-Man. That's just my opinion.
I could see that, but before Batman Begins, I always thought that Batman also, the way he moved was incredibly fast and fluid and doing flips everywhere and all that stuff.
Right.
And then Nolan took over the Batman franchise, and like literally there were scenes in Batman Begins where he was hooking up a villain to a wire, and the villain was suddenly sucked up into the air, and that they were really doing that. He was actually being sucked up into the side of a building by a wire.
Right.
So I'm not saying it would definitely work. I'm not saying it would definitely be the greatest thing in the world. I'm just saying kind of try it, you know?
Right.
Actually, because you'd have to shoot it right, you know? You'd have to have someone willing to try it and shoot it right. A parallel would be the use of the IMAX cameras in The Dark Knight. You know, we'd never seen true IMAX footage done in, well, I guess no real feature film or big budget feature film, especially not a superhero movie. So then when it happened, it was really kind of pushed it to a new realm. You know, it was a new way to look at the superhero film. So I thought that was kind of cool. Okay, so what is your next one?
My next one just ties directly into our introduction. I would say always have a cheerful character who loves what he or she does. And especially depressing characters are a chore to watch. You know, like Peter Parker, he loves being a hero. He wants to do more of it. And he's actually really good at what he does. You know, helping old ladies cross the street, you know, catching small time robbers, and he's just a go-getter. And I think like this is just screenwriting 101. If you have a depressing character, and like people think if I have a depressing character, my character is deeper, it's more layered. That's not the case for that. You have to have a character that actually wants to be there. Happy characters, I just think like it just 99.9% of the population of the world will basically be more receptive of someone who is cheerful, someone who is actually likes life. You know what I mean? I mean, would you agree with that? Would you agree with that sentiment?
I don't. I mean, I don't. No, that's not a scientific study that 99% of the world.
Right.
But yeah, I think usually it's the case,
Or the
unless the particular character warrants it. Like obviously, Batman is going to be dark and brooding. You know,
or
you can't
Logan,
have
or something like Logan or Wolverine, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, in general, or you have a cheerful character in there, not necessarily the main character, which is, I think, what you're saying too. You have a foil who's very cheerful. You know,
Right.
In Wonder Woman, she has her female sidekick played by Lucy Davis, who was Chris Pine's secretary.
Yeah.
Who's the really bubbly, kind of dumb sidekick role. You know, when Wonder Woman's super serious the whole time, pretty much.
Right.
So that works. Speaking of happy, I think there should have been less Happy Hogan and Tony Stark. I think there was too much of them in the film. And the reason it bugged me is that it was emphasizing that Peter Parker was doing this in order to become an Avenger. And if you took that whole motivation out of it, that whole engine out of it, you would still have the same film, except he would be doing the things because he was trying to help people and trying to save people and do the right thing, you know, stop Toomes and his crew from stealing things, you know, which is one of the things the film's been praised for, is that it's focused. It's not him trying to save the world. There's not some huge, you know, enemy from space. It's a pretty contained story. He's trying to stop a guy from stealing things that could potentially hurt a lot of people. So I think it took away from that. And I think the reason they did that is because of the MCU. It felt like a Kevin Feige thing. Like, okay, he needs to be in the Avengers for Infinity War, so we have to show him doing more of a tryout for the Avengers and proving himself to Tony Stark. So therefore, let's make Tony Stark a big character in this film, you know, or maybe they just thought Robert Downey Jr. was enough of a commercial draw that the film was pretty much bulletproof. If people didn't accept Tom Holland, at least they would go for Iron Man. I don't know. So what do you think about that? What do you think about that motivation for Peter Parker?
I thought the motivation was, I was very much fine with it because that was his character arc. I think the motivation of having him want to be part of the Avengers, and at the, you know, spoiler alert again, at the end of it, finally realizing that this is not what he wants. And I think that worked out pretty well and worked fine because, like, remember at the end, Tony Stark was basically saying, like, you have a minute or something like that, or he has right here, right now, make a decision. And he basically just thought of, like, no, I don't, you know, I actually like what I'm doing right now. And I like, you know, being more of a, you know, being in Queens, being in New York, doing what I'm doing. I'm good at that. So I think his addition was necessary. And I think at the end, if it just showed him either attain that goal or, you know, something else, then that would have been completely unnecessary having Tony Stark in it, or Robert Downey Jr. in the film, and even Happy Hogan. I think the fact that at the end he rejected Tony's offer, that made it necessary to have Tony and Happy in there to really give him that arc fulfillment that he had as a character.
I agree that was their intention and it worked as an arc, but I do wonder if they focused more on him as a kid and at high school with his friends. One thing is I wanted to see more of the love story with him and Liz, because it seems like, I know this is its own thing, but in most Star Wars, in most Spider-Man films, they do focus on a love story, you know, whether it was Gwen or MJ. And so I did kind of want to see more of that emphasis and more focus on him as a kid. And I'll talk more about that as we go on. But so what's your next item?
My next item is your villains must have some redeeming qualities. Vulture is bad, but he has a reason to be sort of bad. He has a family and he cares deeply for his wife and daughter. And it sort of makes the audience side with him a bit. I would say that my one criticism is that the very start of the movie showing him going from good to bad was a little bit sudden, but then again, this is a movie. You have to be economical and efficient with the way you tell your stories. It was just enough to make it like believable, but if I was being a little bit picky, I'd be like, yeah, it seems like it was a little bit quick for him to go from, you know, a guy who was like a contractor, construction, you know, manager or something like that, to going to becoming Vulture. But what made his reasonings, I think, what made him sort of a compelling villain is the fact that you see that he's a wife and daughter. He's trying to take care of them, give them the best life that he can. And he sort of also has a code that he sticks to. And, we'll get into that later, sort of at the end of the film. Like, he's not purely bad. He still has certain rules. And he's not going completely in berserk, right? Like, one of his men, like the original, the first Shocker, was basically acting all crazy and demanded more. So he just like completely took him out. He's not a crazed villain. So that's sort of what I like. And like I said in my original review, is that what made him really great was that he wasn't egomaniacal. He wasn't some sort of a villain that would just like randomly kill underlings and things like that. But yeah, he was. I think I liked him, and it probably was to give that more of a credit to Michael Keaton's acting too. I mean, sort of he's already been through the realms of superhero movies back in the 80s and 90s, right? As Batman, and then his most recent take as Birdman. So yeah. So I sort of liked. Always have a villain that you sort of can side with as an audience.
Yeah, I think that was better than, like, let's say his wife was killed by Tony Stark or something.
Right.
I think it was good to make him a current family man, that he had a family.
Right.
Interestingly enough, though, we don't really know that about him. Or does he? No, he says in the opening scene, "I have a family," so exactly. We know that.
Yeah.
But there are things that they, like, for example, when he did take out his crew member, they made a point for him to say, "Oh, I thought this was the anti-gravity gun. I wasn't going to kill him," Yeah. So he wasn't all bad. But going off that, my next item was that I had two main problems with Toomes. Firstly, I would like to have seen him building the suit. I would like to have seen a build up to the moment where the suit was fully functional and he was the Vulture. He had the full mech flying suit on. I think that they should have made that be a payoff later, at least a little bit later, because just, he comes flying in the first time we see him after that opening, which is essentially a flashback. And it just felt too fast for me. Now, the second one is, I know you'll probably hate me for this, but him opening the door and we see that he is Liz's dad. And I know the whole last third of the film depends on that.
Right.
But if that was on the page and I was working as a reader again, I would have said, coincidence, no way. Right. This is way too contrived, Right. So he sold it. It worked because Michael Keaton was great. And the scene in the car when he gave him the dad talk after they dropped off Liz at the dance was great. Although I felt like we could have held on him a little bit more. Like, there was one really killer line he said, "I will kill you dead." But the camera wasn't on him when he said that, but it was so menacing, right, the way that he said that,
Right.
But I felt like it was such a big coincidence that it was a really big stretch on the part of the writers. And I'm just wondering, could there have been another way? I'm sure there could have been another way for him to find out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, right. And have him have it be personal without him having to be Liz's dad. I don't know. What do you think? Did that feel like a stretch at all to you, or did you just say, "Hey, it's fun, I'll go with it"?
Personally, I did not find that as a stretch. In fact, I found that as a personally, like, if I had read that on the page, given the fact that if the writing was pretty good, like if the actual script had a lot of misspellings in it and grammar problems, and then this suddenly appeared, I'd be like, okay, that's a coincidence, because you obviously didn't know what you were doing in the beginning. But obviously, let's just say everything else went well reading it, and if I read that, I would have said, oh, that's a pretty smart decision due to the fact that you're being very efficient with your characters. You're not introducing another element in there, and at the same time, because of this constraint of him suddenly having this twist of being Liz's dad, introduces another sort of conflict into play, right? He constantly wants to, he's been in love with this girl, Liz. He's been wanting to date her. So he gets his chance, and everything is going well until, it's like her dad is the one guy I have to catch. It's like, do I risk my relationship and catch him, or do I just let it slide and basically just date her and just let things move, right? And he sort of has to dive into sort of the definition of what it is to be a hero. Do I make sure that I myself am happy, or do I make sure I do the right thing and make sure I hurt a lot of people doing it? So
I think you still could have had that arc, and you still could have had that decision, even if he wasn't Liz's dad, you know?
Right.
But yeah, it was, I mean, it worked because they sold it, but again, if I saw that on the page, I probably would have thought it was too much coincidence. Speaking of kind of possibly lazy work on the part of the writers, is why did Liz already have to have a crush on him? Why couldn't he win her over the way that Tobey Maguire won over Kirsten Dunst, you know? Because in the comics originally, it was Mary Jane Watson was the beautiful girl next door, and he was the scrawny nerd.
Right.
And he really had to work hard to get her, you
right.
know? So here it's another one of those instances. I know that we have to accept it's a movie, but
right.
the lead character is completely ripped and he's a good looking guy, but
right.
yet nobody notices and everybody thinks he's a nerd, you know?
Right.
So, but when what might have worked there, because I think it was like a special school that was focused on STEM,
yeah,
you know, science and math.
Yeah.
So he really wasn't that nerdy in the context of all the rest of his students. So maybe that makes sense then that Liz would have a crush on him, but it just felt too easy, you know? I wanted to see him work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
So, okay, so why don't we go to your next one?
Okay, my next one is never underestimate the underdog. As Spider-Man, Peter has the upper hand in catching criminals. However, he's still kind of the low man of the totem pole. And that sort of contrasts with what you were saying about him being Liz's semi-crush towards the beginning. But going off of that sentiment, he's still low man of the totem pole in other aspects of his life, right? Like the academic decathlon, sort of like the Flash character, making fun of him. Another aspect is the Avengers, especially Tony Stark. They still see him as a kid who can't play with the big boys, right? His peers don't see him as someone who's popular or cool. And sort of due to this fact that he's sort of an underdog, I think and the fact that he saves, very, old lady, saves, the deli guy, and he also saves the deli guy's cat, right? It sort of ups his likability factor. So I guess the lesson here is to not only make your character, save a lot of people at the beginning. It doesn't have to be them saving people. I mean, let's just bring this down to a much smaller scale. There's one particular lesson that, one of the screenwriting classes I took. It's the fact they showed James Dean in some sort of classic movie where he comes in, he's a drunk guy. I think he was probably arrested for some sort of public disturbance or doing something silly. But what happened was he took his jacket off and he put it around this old man who was cold. So people said, that gave him some sort of redeeming qualities. And this is sort of like upping the likability factor for characters. If you have a character, a protagonist, have him help somebody open the door, have him, pet a dog or feed a, dog a stray dog that always comes by his, store all the time. And at the same time, have him get made fun of. So if you put those two factors out there, it's a person that's made fun of, a low man on the totem pole, yet he, goes against the grain to help people, to help animals. I think it'll up your protagonist likability up by a factor of 10, which will make your audience stick with that character. And as you know, character drives story. And if that's the case, then your audience will follow that character through the whole story.
So you're saying, so you like save the cat moments, to mention that phrase, save the cat, but you're saying it's even stronger if that character's even more of an underdog and no one else is giving them any respect and kind of holding them down, I guess.
Sort of like the Equalizer, the Denzel Washington film, where they set him up as, he saves people and he's good at what he does. But at the same time, I mean, you saw how the Home Depot people, I mean, they weren't really bullying him, but they sort of make fun of him as the old guy and sort of like they play pranks on him and stuff like that. And you're like, okay, I kind of feel, feel a little bad for him. But at the same time, it's like we feel sympathy towards characters like that. And at the same time, we root for characters to help people. So you have those two dimensions in there and you suddenly are like, I really like this guy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I can see that. Okay, so my next item, which would be with the script and the movie, is that I think they should have given the homecoming dance more gravitas. I think it should have had, the actual dance should have been more of a set piece as opposed to something that he left and he physically went to another location. Okay. I love the moment, of course, where he had to leave Liz. He had to once again kind of betray her and leave because he has to choose to be the hero over the regular kid who gets the date with the cool girl.
Right.
But I just thought that there should have been more plates in the air in the actual gym at the dance. His friends should have been active in that climax, the final fight. Liz should have been active. It didn't have to be the absolute cliche where, you know, she's in between him and the villain or anything like that. Although that would have been interesting because the villain was her father. So that would have kind of been interesting if she was in danger, you know. But I didn't feel the homecoming dance had enough of a presence in the film, you know, and it's in the title. So it kind of came in later. And I feel like there just should have been more to it. And again, I wanted to see his friends more integrated into it, you know, with a love story as well.
I see what you mean. So like sort of like probably from the very beginning, there should have been this set goal of Peter saying, I want to win Liz over and take her to the homecoming dance. And everything should have been led up to that. And basically the final battle should have been in that. You know what's funny is that title, I never even thought twice about it when it said Spider-Man Homecoming. The way I read it was sort of like a double meaning, like Spider-Man coming home to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's sort of like how I read it, like homecoming, right? So, but you're right. I mean, yeah, I mean, every time you have a plot A, plot B, plot C, they should intertwine or sort of converge in some way. So the final battle should have been some place with a dance or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, think of it as like a John Hughes movie, but with a massive superhero fight in the middle of it. That would have been kind of cool, you know. Okay, so what's your next item?
My next item actually is something that we had all just covered, which is basically, you know, minimize the amount of characters in our screenplays. I mean, we could actually expand on that. So you had a problem with Liz's dad, Michael Keaton's character, Adrian Toomes being Liz's dad. Spider-Man Homecoming again proves that if you only concentrate on a minimal amount of characters, and I mean concentrate, you can introduce as many characters as you want, but if you do the majority of your script concentrating on these two characters, and if you have to focus on any dimension of these characters, just combine them together. Like if his focus was on that conflict between, you know, Liz, his dating with Liz, right? So they made a very smart choice, which is obviously something you pointed out you didn't like, was that they combined Toomes' character with Liz's father as one character. Coincidence or not, in a lot of screenplays, I would say readers do sometimes come back with notes saying like you have too many characters, maybe combine some of these together because some of them seem alike, or some of them you know, you can focus a lot better on character development if you were to combine groups of characters together.
I wonder if it had more to do with his friends, just that there were a number of his friends on the academic decathlon that maybe some people think, oh, why do we need to know all these people, and wondering if they're going to become heroes themselves or something. But I like that because I thought it was realistic to high school.
Right.
And it was fun to give a few lines to some other characters. You know, there was an African-American kid who he sounded like maybe he was from Africa. He had a thick accent. He had some funny lines in there. So there were some funny kids, I thought. I thought that definitely worked. My next point, which is, interestingly enough, keep it family friendly. And I'll probably sound like the librarian waving my finger at the naughty filmmakers. But my one problem was the one line where, well, firstly, I was in a theater. There were babies crying. There were little kids.
Right.
And these days I'm okay. I can tune that out. In the old days, like in my 20s, it used to drive me bonkers.
Yeah.
I would be yelling, shut up, you know. But now I'm okay. I can tune it out. I understand people have kids, you know, even the 4-year-old wants to go see Spider-Man. Okay.
Right.
And it is for the family. But then there was that one line where Ned said, oh, I was looking at porn.
Right.
And I just couldn't help but think about all those kids, those, you know, 5-year-olds turning to their parents going, what's porn? You know? And I just thought it was tasteless and it didn't need to be in there. And there was such a good setup for a line. There could have been a million other funny punchlines there, you know? So I thought, again, that was also kind of a lazy, crass thing to do. So, but the overall note is, if you're writing a script that's meant to be like a family friendly superhero comic booky movie, You want to keep the tone consistent. So you don't want suddenly them breaking into, you know, dropping F-bombs and stuff. So if you're a screenwriter, keep the tone consistent. Think about your audience. That was one thing when I'm reading scripts, I always have to keep in mind, well, who is the audience for this movie? So the screenwriter obviously has to know their audience. So that's kind of the meta note there. So how about you? What's your next one?
Actually, I was gonna comment on your problem with the porn line. I didn't have a problem with that due to the sheer fact that I knew these were high school kids, and the stuff they're exposed to these days, that was actually, to me, super tame, what he said. And that line got laugh out loud, I mean, clapping and laugh out loud reactions in my theater when Ned said that.
I know it did. And the second time I saw it, it was the biggest laugh in the movie. I know.
Oh, you got
but
it?
I still think it was cheap. I still think it was cheap. I don't know.
I accepted it due to the fact that it is a high school kid, right? And I think it was just, I know what you said, like they should have worked harder for a better line. I just felt like it was natural because, like, what else would you say in that moment, right? That's believable. And I think it was just the fact that he's not a very slick character to begin with. So he could only muster up something that's so shocking that's like to divert himself from or giving away Peter's secret identity, to say something else that's believable. So to me, it played into his character of being this guy that's not so slick, and he just had to come up with some stupid excuse in the middle of it. And that's the only thing he could come up with. But yeah, I guess it's just different opinions. But yeah, I mean, if there was something else they could have written, I would love to see like how else to, you know, they would made it even funnier.
What if he just frozen? You know, she'd been, what are you looking at? And he just frozen and just said, "Man in the chair."
Yeah.
You know, I think that could have worked too, because that was his whole obsession, was man in the chair.
Man in the chair, true, being the control, being
So I'm going to send that note to Columbia Pictures, and they're going to make me the comedy punch-up man, because obviously coming up with gems like that. You know. Okay, Steve, what is your next item?
My next item is your end of Act 2, everything goes wrong event must be initiated and caused by your protagonist. So it can't be coincidental, or it can't be external things causing it. It has to be something, going back to, Screenwriting 101, your protagonist's actions have to have consequences. Your hero's actions must have consequences. So I can cite multiple examples of these, of why Spider-Man Homecoming does a good job with this. Peter's need to save the world.
Firstly, what did you think was the end of Act 2 hitting bottom moment?
I would say it was when Tony took back the Spider-Man suit. That's what I saw at the bottom. Yeah, because I guess this also plays into the fact that like Peter's need to chase after Vulture, right? He got the ferry torn in two, right? And then Tony had to come and basically save everyone and help him out. So in a way, it's like, it's true. In a way, Spider-Man or Peter Parker caused that himself. Like, he was trying to do something good, but because of that battle, those were the consequences of trying to do something good. So I mean, if you notice throughout the whole movie, it's the suit, it's this basically need to become an Avenger, it's this need to be part of the team, and this need to always seek approval from Tony, seek approval from Happy Hogan, telling him where he is, giving them status reports. Suddenly this thing goes wrong and Tony takes that suit away. So in a way, we felt it too, right? It's like we got our heart torn out also. It's like this is what he really wanted to do. This was something he loved doing, and Tony took that away from him. And Tony made that quote too. It says, like, what did he say? He said if you need the suit, then you don't deserve it, or something like that. If you need the suit to be a hero, then you're not a hero at all, or something. So
yeah.
So I'd say yeah. I mean, if it had been something where it's like some external consequence where Vulture tore that ferry in two, and then maybe a bunch of people died or something like that. All right, I get it. It's like fine. It's like, but it's not as I guess doesn't have as great of an impact if the protagonist caused it himself. So good or bad, your protagonist has to drive that, has to cause that.
In terms of kind of classic structure, probably his declaration of war, assumption of power, was when he did start the fight on the ferry.
Right.
And then that continued for a long action sequence, which I think was the best sequence in the movie. It was a really incredible set piece. And then you're saying then the end of Act 2 hitting bottom is when Tony took the suit, which I can totally see, and that probably was in that 85 to 90 minute range.
Yep.
But then how about after that, there was longer than half an hour left in the movie. So do you think there was maybe a third and a fourth act?
I will say this. I actually,
Act 3 after.
you bring up a very good point, because I did think of those points a lot, like where was it, and I sort of debated it, and I think that something goes wrong wasn't just one solid event like a milestone. I think that was a span of time, because that thing that went wrong was the fact that he got his suit taken away, and then finding out that the guy he's chasing after is the father of the love of his life, or the girl he has a crush on. So I think those events compounded into what's known as the end of Act 2, the sort of the everything goes wrong moment. He's like, oh my God, it's like, how can things get worse? I finally have this girl, and now I found out her dad's the bad guy, the guy that I've been chasing. So
yeah. The reason I was, when I saw it again today, him opening up the door and Michael Keaton is there as the dad, it was such a hard right turn, as opposed to Spidey screwing up and then Tony Stark taking the suit. It was not that crazy of a thing to happen. It wasn't a complete turn. And at the end of each act, you do want a really strong turn. So when that happened today, I was like, okay, that's probably the end of Act 2. But you know what, if they went with like a 4 or 5 act structure, that could have been, so you have Act 1, Act 2A, Act 2B, end of Act 2B is when Tony takes away the suit. And then maybe end of Act 3 is when he opens up the door. And then there is still Act 4 left, which is technically Act 5, because 2 is split into 2. So, not to get too technical, but because the longer films do sometimes have an extra act in them. So that's interesting. We'll have to map it and see what we think after we really analyze it and map it down to the minute. That would be really interesting.
Yep.
Okay, so those are all our main things. And one more just quick thing I wanted to mention was the bad corporate product placement, which I have a better idea. So they had, Ned and Peter had that geeking out thing where they were building the Death Star, right? And it was a Lego Death Star. And the Death Star Star Wars, which is owned by Disney, which is co-producing with Sony, which owns Columbia Pictures, right? And this is the first time Spider-Man has come over into the MCU, which is owned by Disney. So there's some cross promotion there.
Right.
I think it would have been so much cooler if the thing that they were geeking out about was like their own little robot, or like Rube Goldberg machine that they had built for their robotics team, Personally, I love, the robotics team. I've written the script about that and stuff.
Right.
But I think it just would have been cool if they were a little bit more technical and it was something that they truly, had really worked hard and used their brains to build.
Right.
Also, Star Wars isn't only geek these days. It's so mainstream. So I didn't quite feel you guys are such nerds for doing that, So I think that was perhaps a moment lost, a missed opportunity. But maybe that was more for corporate synergy than it was for the story. I don't know.
Right. I think I agree with you on that one. I mean, I think when I first saw that, immediately that lit up in my mind. It's like, of course, it's like it's almost like, how can I even say it? It's like KFC or Taco Bell using Pepsi, right? It's like, why are you using Pepsi? Oh, they're owned by the same company. That's why, right? So in a way, and you're right too, Star Wars and even I'd say Star Trek is a lot more mainstream nowadays. To me, it's like, it's not, Comic-Con, look at that. One of the biggest events in the world, right? It's no longer geek. It's cool to be geeky now, right? It's just different. So I would think like, and what would have tied in this stuff even more, that if you want to talk about really geeky stuff, is maybe Ned and him had a bug collection and they were trying to catch this one specific, really, really like, and it's probably some sort of gross bug that these two that only wanted to are fascinated by. Everybody's like, that is disgusting, right? It's like, oh, you don't understand. It's like all these blah, 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 and only comes out once every 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So
or a coin collection or something like really,
something
really
vintage,
geeky.
something. I agree with that point. Yeah.
Or if they had their own club, like the Latin Club or something that just was like way geeky.
Exactly.
I don't know. But it was interesting though. There was that one little joke about the kid who was in the room that was the chess club. And he
Yeah.
said, look, chess, that he was like the nerds of the nerd school,
Yeah, exactly.
which was kind of funny. But yeah. But I guess you can't have a ripped, good-looking teenager and have him be the biggest, most scrawny nerd in the school, you know?
Right.
I guess audiences just aren't going to go for that, especially if they're already the ripped superhero, because like in the original Tobey Maguire's Sam Raimi Spider-Man,
Right.
he was super scrawny, and then after he gets bit, obviously then he gains muscle
Right.
and stuff.
Right.
So any final thoughts as far as story, screenwriting? What was your biggest takeaway, you think, from this being different from any of the other MCU films from a story perspective?
I'd say, you know, certainly, they certainly found their sort of DNA in Marvel, the Marvel universe. I mean, everybody talks about, oh, it's boring, it's a template that Marvel follows, and I think if that is what you want to call a template, I think Marvel has done a very good job in knowing the heart of their story, right? They know that it's this character that people love, is these characters that have awkward flaws that everybody in the world has. And when I mean flaws, I don't mean flaws like, you know, some people try to introduce some deep characters like, oh, he has he's an alcoholic, or he has this problems, he has a divorced wife. Their problems are actually very funny problems that we can feel sympathy for, and we can sort of laugh at too, and sort of see that geek in us. And I think that's the sort of thread that Marvel has found, and I think they've put that inside every single character. And if you can see that, it's very evident in Ant-Man, right? Even if you think about it, Scott Lang's character was a nerd too. He was like an electrical engineer, and even though he wanted to be a thief, he was a very humorous thief, right? He didn't want to hurt anybody, and he was just like, even the stuff he does was like sort of like really not that slick. He couldn't really learn how to fight and everything like that. And they used a lot of humor. So I think a lot of these characters that they have a really good sense of humor for every single character that the MCU has introduced. And I think that's a very strong thing that you have to know about your character, is that they can't always be, going back to my initial points, always be depressing and dank and have, never have anything funny to say, not have a very good, outlook in life. So I think in creating a great character, you have to make sure like you find the character's humor and you find the character's viewpoint and focus on that, and focus on sort of having that character push the story through within his viewpoint, within how he wants to see the world. So I think that works really well.
Yeah, you definitely want to define their POV, what makes them unique about how they see the world, and their background, very specifically in as much detail as you can, and make it as unique as possible.
Yeah.
But you're right about even if they have a darker movie, kind of more serious movie like Civil War or Captain America: The Winter Soldier, or even Age of Ultron, they have enough comedic relief sprinkled in there, to that it's still fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, like Winter Soldier and Civil War, they're really serious stories,
Exactly.
But they sprinkle in enough humor, like Ant-Man in Civil War is basically just comedic relief. He's hilarious.
Exactly. Yep.
Paul Rudd is hilarious. But what's interesting now, I think, what they're doing is they're introducing solo films after the character's already been introduced in a group movie. So like Black Panther and Spider-Man were both introduced in Captain America: Civil War. Now they're getting their solo films, as opposed to what they did in the beginning. Was first you had the Thor solo film, the Captain America solo film, the Iron Man solo film, and then they were in the Avengers, and then we're going to be getting Ant-Man and the Wasp as well. So I think that's really interesting.
So plot twist right here. Plot twist. Do you think they're trying to follow DC's template now? Let's introduce all these characters and then give them their solo movies.
Maybe it's the snake biting its own tail here. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think Marvel is is following at all what DC's doing? I wonder if they.
I don't think so.
I think about it.
To tell you the truth, I was just joking there, but I think Marvel is very much staying with the way comics have been doing it. Because you notice character introductions, aside from their, like even going through Superman, we had Action Comics #1 and maybe Detective Comics, I forgot what number is, I should be taking my Batman badge should be taken away. Forgot what the first appearance of Batman was. Number 13.
27.
27. Look at this. That's like
terrible. How could you forget that?
Old age. My synapses are dying. But those characters were actually introduced in their own sort of solo comic books, right? But if you go towards now the current ones, if you notice a lot of these comic books now, they'll have stuff like, oh, this character was first introduced in Avengers something something. They were actually introduced in comic books which were focused on other characters. So actually it's pretty normal. It's the way I think it's the way the comic books are. They're following the way the comic books are actually introducing characters now. Because they're done with their phase one. Phase one is, okay, these are the main characters that are driving our universe. So now they have all these other side characters coming in. They can say like, oh, you know, we introduced this new character in this movie, and then he's getting their solo film, just like the comic books. Like first appearance in blah, 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 number 15. And then his first official solo outing was in this self-title, whatever like that, like Spider-Man number 1 or something like that.
Do you think they're going to totally phase out the original Avengers MCU characters? Oh,
I think it's already in the works. I think Kevin Feige has said that post Infinity War Part 2 or the second one was, I don't think it's even called Part 2, but it's just the movie after Infinity War. It's going to be the whole new roster lineup. And if you look at it, Sebastian Stan, the guy that plays Winter Soldier or Bucky Barnes in the Captain America movies, and he signed up for an 11-picture deal. So what happens is in the comic books, he's going to take over the mantle of Captain America. So because Captain America in one of the comic books, he gets shot and then basically quote unquote killed. Of course he comes back. Tony Stark has that female or that girl that's a college student that's to MIT or something like that take over her mantle. And then even going a little bit out of the universe, right? Even Logan, right? Wolverine's mantle was taken over by X-23, which is that character. So they are kind of introducing the sort of the thread of these younger characters that are coming in, sort of taking over their mantle. Not really younger, but replacement characters that are coming in. I mean, I don't know. I think personally, I think Robert Downey Jr. doesn't seem like a guy that's tired of Tony Stark. He seems like he really enjoys playing that character, and he enjoys being he really embraces that character a lot. Who knows? I mean, who knows about Thor? I mean, all these MCU or actors and stuff like that, they don't seem like they're very tired of their characters.
Yeah, and I think they all have contracts that are coming up.
Yeah.
So obviously they would ask for more money, but I think they know where their bread is buttered and they have a loyalty to the brand.
Yeah.
And they have fun with the movies. So I don't think they're all going to ask for $20 million a movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be, what I'm wondering about is who's going to die in Infinity War, because we had that flash forward,
right?
That in the Cave of the Norns where Hulk has that like vision, and we see them. They're basically all like dead in a pile, right?
Right. Oh, or that was wasn't that Tony's vision in Age of Ultron? That was the one Scarlet Witch made him see. Yeah, Scarlet Witch. She made him see that vision. So I'm not sure if that's even going to come to light, or she was just messing with his mind or something like that.
Okay. But you had the little hint, which might be a fake out, which is Captain America's shield was cut in half.
Yeah.
So immediately I'm like, okay, so that means he's going to die. Yeah. And we know that Chris Evans's contract is up.
Yeah.
But that could be a fake out. I mean, potentially Tony Stark could die. I mean, he's done so many movies. Who knows?
I mean, even Captain America dying, that's actually part of the comic books, because he is assassinated on the steps somewhere. He's shot. And then basically Bucky Barnes takes over his mantle and becomes the new Captain America. But of course, like comic books, right? Like Superman didn't die for long, didn't stay dead for long, and he came back. Yeah, so, I mean, how are they going to introduce it? But I know that they can only do so many characters. I mean, they have Captain Marvel coming out and all these things. So they're going to have a new Avengers lineup pretty much very soon. I mean, they already had one at the end of Age of Ultron, right? They had, they basically had Falcon and also, Vision and all these people being combined together.
Yeah, I actually was thinking Falcon would become the new Captain America.
He does later too. Like all these people that knew Steve, I think becomes Captain America. I think Captain America is just a mantle or something like that. It's not really one person either.
Yeah. They seem to really like Bucky Barnes though. I don't know. I don't think he has. that much charisma to be an ongoing hero. I think he was great in the role that he had, but yeah, who knows? It'll be interesting to see. So next is Black Panther is in the fall.
Black Panther's in the fall, yeah. Oh, and then Thor Ragnarok.
Yes. And is that going to be like March, or is that also in the fall?
No, Ragnarok, I think, is in the fall. I think Black Panther is next year, I think that's the case.
Really? I thought Black Panther was like November.
No, I think that's Ragnarok.
Because they don't seem to be having many. Well, I guess they do have that trailer on.
Yeah, Black Panther is February 16th, and then Thor Ragnarok, yeah. And then Thor Ragnarok is November 3rd. Yeah, that's the one that's coming up.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
So
and the big draw there is him battling Hulk.
Yep, and I think it's going to be. I think the humor level is going to be upped on that one, knowing how well, like I said, like Marvel has sort of found their sort of their groove, right? So I will imagine that they're getting a lot of directors that know a lot of comedy, so that's very good.
What's interesting, which rarely happens, is there was 3 writing teams on Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Right.
You know, if you notice, there's the and symbol, which means they're a writing team.
Yeah, the ampersand.
And there were 3 separate, ampersand, 3 separate teams. So I would really like to see some interviews where they talk about what they brought to the table, you know, who brought what. That would be really interesting to find out. I think you were a little bit more enamored with the story than I was.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it was good. I definitely enjoyed it more than Wonder Woman. I'm not a Wonder Woman fan. I know that 99% of the world loved it, but I just had a lot of problems with it. I think it was a lot clunkier of a movie than any Marvel movie. Maybe because, I don't know if that was because the director hadn't done that genre before. I don't know. Or it was because DC has their own thing going on where they're not doing as great of movies as they should be. I don't know. But for me, it just was too clunky. But you kind of can't beat the MCU. I mean, the MCU, they consistently deliver. So that's hard to beat.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, why don't we wrap up? Thanks for joining me, Steve. And you can find more of Steve's articles and things at bamsmackpow.com. And you can learn more about me at act4screenplays.com. And you can check out my books, Story Maps, How to Write a Great Screenplay, and Story Maps TV Drama. And you can find those on Amazon as well. All right, until next time, this is the Story Map Screenwriting Podcast. Good luck and happy writing.